Who's this? Oh, you're an entrepreneur? Oh, you're a real estate investor. Oh, you're trying to learn from those who did it. Well, come into the lab then. Put your white coat on, gloves on, notepad, and let's build, y'all.
Experimentation, this message is for you if you are a short-term rental host. Pay attention closely, because if you recall, we had an individual by the name of Mark Simpson step into our lab and tell us the importance of building a short-term rental business where your clients and future guests are booking with you directly, not solely depending on OTAs such as Airbnb, VRBO, Expedia.com, the list goes on. And his reasoning behind it is that you want to leverage these OTAs and not be solely dependent on them so that you can actually build your business that you are in control of. Extremely important for you to do this, for you to be in control of your business and grow and scale it properly. Now, I did read the book from beginning to end, and the announcement is that he has launched a book called the Book Direct Playbook, which launches this February 2022. You want to make sure you get your hands on this book, because I certainly did from beginning to end, and I got more than just about OTA. He gave the foundation of true marketing, which is a specialty that he does because he is the founder of Boostly, who has helped numerous hosts over and over build very credible websites that allow the guests to book with you directly. Now, I want to highlight something. It's very important that you understand that Mark is not saying to not use OTAs. He's saying to leverage them to then be in control to build your own business. And he actually gives a very key gold template on how to actually create an incentive for your hosts or your guests, I should say, to stay with you as a host by booking with you directly. There is a strategic way to do this, and he does cover this in his book. You want to make sure that you get his book at the link below. You see right here, boostly.co.uk/book. In this book, it will give you the foundations, marketing foundations, a key guide to guide, and at the same time, every chapter has the instructions sections that gives you guidelines on what the next call to action, what the next step is. You need to refer to it the exact same way you would refer to any book you have in the lab as a practitioner who's going to take action to take control of your short-term rental business. Again, that is boostly.co.uk/book. That's boostly.co.uk/book. Make sure you get your hands on this book. You will not be disappointed.
Real estate experiment. What is happening, y'all? Today, I have the pleasure of having Steven Pesavento. Did I get that right? Pesavento? Am I stressing that? Pesavento. Is that better?
Yeah, Steven Pesavento. You got it.
My man. So it's a pleasure to have you in the lab today. I just want to thank you because I know we originally connected offline, and it's just always good to see you come when I have individuals who come into my lab and I see it come full circle, especially in our space. It happens more often. So I want to give you the introduction that you deserve, because last time we connected, I know that you're doing a lot of things in the space, and one is actually you're a practitioner, of course, but you also have a podcast called The Investor Mindset, and which is right on cue with our brand, because we talk about the mind behind the experiments and the mindset that you have to have, the systems that you have to have. But with that said, you're also a practitioner, and you've been able to implement this boots on the ground. And I just want to highlight a little bit of what you've done here, because I think it's a point before we kind of get right into it. I mean, it's very interesting. You and I were talking offline about your background in some consulting that you then from tech, then you transition into real estate, which has led to over 200 transactions. I mean, right now you went over 100 houses, you transacted over 26 million. You're a partner of VonFinch Capital, and you're doing some amazing things as well online. And I know you and I talked about you want to transition and take some of that into the coaching side, which you're already doing. So, I mean, there's so much to unpack there, but I first of all, I want to invite you and welcome you to the lab as a true practitioner. You got your white coat on, wearing a lab here if you guys are listening, and I'm excited to have you here, man. What's going on?
Ruben, excited to be here. Love what you've been able to put together with the great audience here, and really excited to be able to dive in. I mean, when I was a kid, I wanted to be one of two things. I either want to be a chef like Emeril Lagasse, or I wanted to renovate property like Bob Vila. And, all that HGTV finally paid off when I left the management consulting world, when I left the tech world behind, and I went all in real estate. And real estate's just a business. You're just buying an asset. You're going to operate that asset, and you're going to make profits and losses off of that. And it's been a phenomenal business. But I think the thing that really gets me fired up the most, you alluded to, is the work that we do with the investor mindset, right? We dive into lessons learned from some of the most successful entrepreneurs and thought leaders and investors in the world every single week. And we've been doing it for years, hundreds and hundreds of episodes. And what I love about that, what really fires me up, is just the power that we can bring to impact and inspire other people, bringing these lessons, these ideas. How can we really change our thoughts and beliefs? Because at the core, mindset is simply your thoughts and beliefs that end up leading to the actions you take and therefore the outcomes you experience. And what's so powerful about that is that when you realize that mindset itself is just the operating system, and when you can change that code, you actually start having a different result. And for me, I ended up having, growing up in a pretty rough and tumble household, maybe other people can relate, pretty working class, definitely blue collar. But by being able to get around other people, listen to podcasts, listen to audio programs, listen to tapes back in the day, and go to events, be able to really upgrade the way that I think. And that's why I'm on a mission to be out here sharing some of those beliefs on growing your business, getting invested, so that you can actually start having some of that freedom that we all dream about when we decide to go into entrepreneurship.
Appreciate that. That's like such a good recap. And I want to highlight what you said for a second, because you talked about operating system. And I'm a believer. The reason I do this, a guy like you're in this space, you're, practitioner, you've had your successes and some, challenges, I'm sure, along the way, which we'll talk about. But I look at our operating system, or our brains, our minds, like a software that you gotta update, right? You gotta update it every single day, because things are changing, moving pretty quickly. And if you know anything about update, yeah, go ahead.
No, go, please continue.
And with that update, right, as we're rewiring our software, even you mentioned a lot of things that I want to highlight. You talked about books, you talked about podcasts, a show like this, but I want to highlight something, Steven, if you don't mind. I think is important, as we get a lot of inputs these days, right? And you have to, in a software, there's input and then there's output, right? And hopefully there's a lot more output than input, because we can input a lot of information, get a lot of stimulants, we can get a lot of podcasts, and get a lot of books, we could get a lot of that. And what sometimes I try to figure out was, like, what was the input for you, the source that led to an action, to an output? Because I know there was a transition at some point, and I'm curious as to see if it was an accumulative event, or if it was that there was this one thing you're like, I think right there, this is going to make me shift into this space. What was that for you?
Yeah, well, there's so many of them. If I go back to one of my earliest memories of this, it was actually, I remember walking into the kitchen, and I saw my dad crying. And money had always been one of those super painful topics. It was one of those topics that everything was about limits, and we don't have enough. Don't ask for it. Go ask your dad for it. Go ask your mom for it. I already pay for it. We can't afford it. All of these different thoughts and beliefs that were been installed from a very early age. Our parents were doing the very best they could, but to be honest, the kind of beliefs that they were installing into our brains were not very helpful. And I remember when I walked in and I saw that, and I was 15 years old, and I'd seen this my entire life, but I had finally been at the point where I was like, this is enough. I'm going to find a way. I'd already been working for years, making a little bit of cash money on the side, and, paying my way for a lot of things, even as a young kid. But I remember specifically walking out of the kitchen, not being able to handle that feeling, that emotion that he was going through, that he was experiencing, just because there was more stress and more pain. And I went out to go find any way that I could make money. I was hustling. I was buying and selling stuff online, buying paintball gear on one form, selling it on eBay, buying stuff on Craigslist, drop shipping back and forth, doing anything I could make a buck. Heck, at one point I was even selling booze out of my trunk, buying from Costco at discount and selling at a markup based on what the local liquor store was selling it for. And, I'm not proud of all the ways I went to go make a buck, but the big thing that I learned was that it's possible, that when you're in survival mode, you can do anything. Anything is possible. But it's really important to get aligned with those values, because at that point in time, my value that was important to me was make money, not have to deal with that pain. So I was willing to do anything, right? But as you grow up, as you go to that next level, and as some of you guys are building entrepreneurial businesses, you're going to get past that struggle phase. You're going to get past that phase where you're just trying to prove to yourself that you can do it. And that's where it really gets tough, because what got you here is not going to be what gets you to that next level. And so I can remember a very big lesson learned going from this feeling of not being enough, needing to prove to other people, prove to myself that I could do this, that I could be an entrepreneur, that I could make money on my own. And that's a really big driver, especially if you're a go-getter. But it was actually after making hundreds of thousands, being successful, making millions of dollars in revenue in our business, that I had to shift that belief to, hey, well, how can I build something that's bigger than me? How can I build something that is beyond just myself, so that I had some other bigger motivation? I could let go of that chip on my shoulder that used to drive me. And I don't know, Ruben, if you can relate to that, but I talked to a lot of entrepreneurs and they had that drive. And that same drive that got them to one level of success is exactly what holds them back from getting to that next level.
Yeah, it's interesting, Steve, because you know what, it's it's interesting, this drive, and I know that you mentioned your dad, and you kind of remember that, and I have similar conversations, or at least the kind of conversation that happened within our household was very similar to the, we don't have enough, it's this trend. And I think there's two ways, because it's interesting, right? Like there's four of us in the household, right? As far as siblings go, and it's kind of the same environment, but we all react to it very differently. And I know I don't know if there is a nature nurture. I think that's we can go down the whole rabbit hole, but the reason why I have this podcast is to handle what you can control. And that's the nurture, right? Because, when you're in that environment and this is what you're hearing, you had two options, right? You either kind of go with the, believe in it, or you kind of go in the other direction and say, no, this is in it. Right. And so what I'm curious about is, you mentioned a journey that, I'm very familiar with. I've done drop shipping. I've done a lot of different business models, or even experiments, as I would call it, in the lab. And I'm curious as to, what do you think, Steve, that it's necessary to do multiple experiments, as you've done, as what we call in our lab experiments, or in hindsight 2020, you say, no, I should have done this instead? And I'm not so much talking about well, yeah, maybe I am talking a little bit about volume versus being strategic. Like, is there something you look back on now that you're like, maybe I should have done this? Or do you actually think that the volume was beneficial in your case?
This is such an important question, right? It's all about discovery. I do want to touch on something that you said, right? When I'm talking about, painful experience as a young person, there's plenty of those painful stories, and we all have them. But that difference between nurture versus nature, and the difference that I really see in very successful investors and entrepreneurs, is that they see challenges as opportunities, right? And I've got these 5 success principles. I'll share a little link about how you guys can get access to all of them, because I don't think we'll cover all of them today. But one of them is that investors and successful entrepreneurs, they look at those challenges in their lives as opportunities. And to me, that challenge of growing up with not enough, growing up with limiting beliefs, growing up in that environment was actually beautiful. It was a beautiful opportunity to cut me into the hard piece of stone that I needed to be to go out into the world and do what I needed to do, right? That doesn't mean at the core there wasn't this big heart. That doesn't mean at the core there wasn't all these other great things, but I had to grow up. I had to learn. Right. And so that was a beautiful opportunity that allowed me to have a whole nother level of motivation. Now, my siblings, I also oldest of 4, they each in their own way have a totally different view of life. For me, it was no way in hell I was going to be poor. There's no way that I'm not going to do something that I love. There's no way that I'm not going to make money doing it. That doesn't mean at all points during my life I've been well off or wealthy, but I just would never let that standard happen. And so that was one of those challenges becoming an opportunity, being a big motivator. And it's so true throughout almost every part of your business, because the profit is in the problems. So great problems equals great profit. And we really want to be able to go and look for that in the world And, just from a real estate perspective, just to give a little bit of my world, at VonFinch Capital, we go out and buy large institutional multifamily deals. Those are 200-300 unit apartment buildings, probably the same kind of places that you've stayed in, or maybe you're living in, or somebody's, has some friends that are living in, whatever that might be. Well, we want to find those properties that are problematic, that are ugly, that are beaten down, that are torn up, because that means that we get to come in and add value. We get to improve that, and that ends up leading to profit. So I just think the biggest challenges in your life actually are opportunities. There's a phenomenal book that I recommend. I listen to it 2, maybe even 3 times a year, from Ryan Holiday, called The Obstacle is the Way. And this book is really at the center of the idea of challenges are opportunities. It's really saying, go towards the obstacle, because that's where you're going to grow. And so just to kind of build on that, to answer your original question, do I think, going down and having multiple different paths is the right way? Well, the truth is that I think having ultra focus is one of the other 5 success principles that I noticed the most successful investors and entrepreneurs, they all have. What does that mean? That doesn't mean that they only do one thing and they never, ever, 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 ever try to do another thing. No, that's not what it means. What it does mean is that while they're doing that one thing, that's the only thing they're thinking about. Other ideas might pop up, but they continuously say no. And you say, Steven, well, hey, I know a ton of entrepreneurs and successful people who have multiple income streams, have multiple businesses. But the truth is, they didn't get multiple businesses or multiple income streams until they had one successful one, right? And so what I recommend, I do recommend going and trying a bunch of different things. As you put it, doing experiments, because you're not going to be able to know yourself well enough until you've had some experience in the world. And having that self connection to who you are, and being able to identify what you are the best at, what you like, what you don't like, is exactly what early in your career should be all about. And so constantly try different projects. That's what was great about management consulting. That's what's great about being a young person in the workforce. You get to go and work in different companies and different organizations and try things. And through that process, you see what you like and what you don't like. And a perfect example of that is I built a house flipping company that was, we flipped 75 houses a year. We flipped over 200 houses, all out of state, all remote, and over $1 million of revenue a year, starting from year 1. I had no experience in the business. I'm not saying that to brag, just to say what's possible. But after building that business, that was a dream, I realized I had built a business to answer a question that was different than my real goals and intent. And so I dismantled that and went down another path. But it took 3-4 years of working on that project to really know at the core that I was out of alignment. And so the more often that we can get clear on what you want and why you want it, the more often you can check in and see if you're truly in alignment with that. And the more often that you can make small little changes on your path towards where you actually want to be, instead of needing to make big ones. So a lot there to unpack, but I'll pass it back to you, Ruben.
No, it's it's interesting too. It's funny that you said Ryan Holiday, because that's definitely a key plug right there. It's so interesting what you're saying, because, and this is, I think, why this is so tough, and this is why I want to kind of peel back the curtains a little bit, because on one end it's test a lot, which I always say, experiment broad. That's, we believe in the hourglass model. You go broad, then go niche, or very, very focused. Then, ironically enough, then you can kind of grow broad again, because to your point, you have the means, you have the resources, or you even have what I love the most, as Experiment Nation knows, and that is vertical integration, right? So once you have that, everything kind of feeds one another. But then you said something interesting that kind of almost challenges that in itself, is, maybe I'd like to call it kind of like progressive experiments, because once you go down the path of even being focused, you might discover some areas where you're, maybe this isn't it, deep down inside, but you have to plant deep roots, to your point, to even discover that. And the reason I'm highlighting this is someone might be listening that might think that, yeah, well, I'm just pivoting, I'm just deciding that too fast, and we're not going deep enough. And I think it's hard to honestly tell the two apart from a distance. And I think that is the challenge, I think, with when we talk about, when should I, pivot, use the word pivot, or decide that this is not right. I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on that, because I know you've worked with a lot of high level individuals.
I have, fortunately, at VonFinch Capital, it's full of high net worth, high income individuals. People are making great money in their business or in their career, and they invest in these private real estate deals, co-owning them while we manage and they invest. But then, let alone in my coaching business, I'm a high performance coach for very high level executives, people who are already operating at the top of their field, and they're looking for that little 1 or 2 or 3% little bump that makes millions more in their business. And what I have noticed from research and what I have found from my own experience is that the key piece of this process is that, like a true experiment, we have to have a hypothesis going in of what we expect is going to happen. And then we have to actually run the full test. What a lot of people do is they say to themselves, I'm going to go and try this thing. Keyword, try. Hate that word. They're going to go try this thing, and then they try it and they only got a little taste of it, but they didn't really run a full experiment. Rather, if you go to yourself and you say, hey, you know what? I really think that I want to start investing in real estate. I think that I want to be active operator because I want to be in control of every single little thing, and I want to make this my business. Now, you might say, hey, I'm going to go do that. And my test is I'm going to go buy a single family rental property, and I'm going to manage it. I'm going to be responsible for it. I'm going to learn about how to do that. I'm going to make some mistakes along the way, but I'm going to do this experiment, and I'm going to do it for 1 year. I'm going to see what the result is after 1 year. Well, if you quit 1 month into it after looking at 2 properties, then you haven't really run the experiment. Now, maybe you did get some good information. Maybe the information you got was, you know what, I actually don't have the time to do this, or I'm not willing to prioritize the time. Maybe the information you got was, you know what, I actually don't know what the heck I'm doing. I don't feel confident that I'm the right person to be doing this. Or maybe you realize that you bought a property and it was a huge failure because you're really a great salesperson, but you're not a great real estate operator. Now, any of those things you exited before the experiment was over. So there's a few in there where maybe you just wanted to dip your toe in, you wanted to get a little taste of it, and you realize, nope, this is not the good fit. But if you commit to the experiment and you've already gone far enough in to know that this is the direction I want to go, you need to follow it all the way through. That way, on the other side, you have new information that you can go out to, because then maybe you realize, like, oh, I love this. I love being in control. I love it when the property manager calls me and wants me to be the one to make the decision. I like being in that position. Now, many other people, they hate it, and they end up coming to firms like ours, or, many others out there where they'll invest their money and they're 100% hands off. But the key here is they were intentional about what they were looking for at the beginning. They went and they put in the time, and then they reassessed at the end and decided, hey, is this actually the direction I want to keep going?
Oof, my goodness, drop the mic, man. You couldn't have said it any better. Like that was really well summarized, man, and you actually helped me say it, because I was struggling to actually bring that one home for experimentation. You nailed it on the head, because to your point, in the lab, you can't just start with the intro and not come up with the conclusion. And what you were talking about is data. Did you execute the experiment so that you're collecting data? And what does that data tell you? And that data, you should be able to reflect on it with respect to your intention, which I love that. With your intention, with your core values, is it in alignment? Does this data align? That data could be whatever data point you're looking for. It could be a certain amount of money, it could be a certain amount of milestone, it could be a specific feeling that you're looking for. And that is why it's so important to be in tuned with what it is that you're looking for, or maybe in being open-minded to what you're going to discover when the data comes on the other side. And the only way that the data can come on the other side is, to your point, Steven, is when you execute from beginning to end. And you know what's really cool about that, Steve? People like you right now, we're in a lab. There's no excuse, because we can't say that we don't know what executing. I don't know when it's over. No, you know what, when you're well, let's say when you're, and this is a great transition and segue into how you evaluate deals. There's so much information and data out there on how to evaluate a deal from beginning to end. And if you follow that procedure and you do it, what data point do you get? Right. And I love that. You were going to add something, Steve.
Well, I think the other thing too is, like, even while I laid out the example experiment, just by laying that out, I've already found a few errors in it, right? Depending on where you were at in that trial, Committing to a year might be too long. Maybe you need to run a 2-week experiment. You need to go read everything that's available online. You need to listen to 100 episodes of the Investor Mindset podcast. You need to go make 15 offers on the MLS. That's your experiment. That's small enough that you're going to get data to say, hey, do I actually like the activity that goes into this? Or am I willing to stay through whatever difficult time? So just by setting up with intention, you're going to discover a better way to be able to shorten that time frame so that you can make that decision much quicker. And with that intentionality going into it by saying, hey, I'm going to make 15 offers in the next 2 weeks on new properties. At the end of that, you don't feel like a failure if you decide to go another direction. But if you commit to something all out and you tell all your friends you're going to be a real estate investor and build this business, and you go 2 weeks in and you quit, well, you've committed to something before you actually had the information to know that it was the right direction. So just wanted to add that because I think it'll be valuable for people to have in context.
Yeah. And when you said that, actually, I promise I'm going to bring this home, brother. You said something that really resonated with me as well, is sometimes the destination or the destination that we have for what we think it takes to get there is actually a series of experiments that need to happen. It's a compounding effect, right? Which then makes you realize that sometimes we're shooting for a result that takes 10 experiments to get to, but we haven't calculated, we haven't gathered the right procedures to execute that experiment that we think we're going to get there with one successful experiment. So that's actually also important to realize, because you may execute from beginning to end, but you may also have a missed target. And I think people like you and folks who come into the lab who have had success can you can reverse engineer and realize that this is a process, right? This overnight success that's what you see on the front end, but on the back end, there's multiple experiments. And now this is my segue to the next point here is, you mentioned, and I love how you said this, it's the challenge is an opportunity. So there's going to be challenges along the way. There's going to be some nights where you can't figure out that problem set. You cannot get the experiment right. You're getting the wrong result. And you said something very interesting. You said that you see those challenges as opportunities. So as a segue into what you're doing with VonFinch Capital, I'm curious. You said you're looking for value add, an opportunity. With respect to where we're on the marketplace right now, I just want to give folks some context, because obviously we've heard investors come in here and talk about, I think Experiment Nation has a good idea, has a good insight on investing. But for you specifically, when it comes to your strategy, what kind of asset classes are you looking at? Just to give some context, are we talking Class C here? What are you doing? Are you managing? Are you also acquiring? Like, give us a little bit of a background for our listeners who may not be familiar with what VonFinch Capital does, because I think you touched on it, but I'd love for you to bring that home.
For sure. Well, as we're talking back about challenges being opportunities, I want to give listeners an opportunity to learn more, to dive deeper into these philosophies, and to grab a copy of the 5 success principles to live with the investor mindset. And you can grab these 5 success principles at investormindset.com/success. That's investormindset.com/success. And I'm sure you'll put those in the show notes for folks. So a little bit about what VonFinch Capital does is, VonFinch Capital, we're a private equity real estate firm. And at the core, what we do is we make it very easy for everyday investors to get involved owning real estate and getting all the benefits of owning and investing real estate without being responsible for any of the day-to-day. So essentially, the way that it works is you invest and we handle all of the rest. And so what that means is we essentially go out, we source very large properties through our network, buying 200-300 unit apartment buildings. We're buying in multiple different asset classes within the multifamily sector. And what we do is we go out and we find these opportunities. We put together the teams on the ground locally in each of the markets that we work in, from Denver to Dallas to Jacksonville to Phoenix to Atlanta and to some other submarkets in between. And we actually go and purchase this property and we run it just like any business. That's one of the cool things about multifamily and really commercial real estate, is that what we're essentially buying is a business, but we're able to put real estate debt on it. And so the entire business plan is to raise rents or decrease expenses, right? How can we increase income on the property? And when we increase income, then we increase the valuation, because the value is just a denomination of that net operating income for all you business people out there. So what's really cool about this is we've got the experience in the market, we've got those connections, we've got the team, we understand what we're looking at, and then typically investors receive 60 to 80% of the profit, meaning we make our money based on investing some of our own funds, but we really make majority of our money based on success. And so what's really cool about that is even in a very competitive market right now, we're going into 2022. It's very competitive. There's a lot of inflation going on, which means there's a lot of money looking for assets to hedge against inflation. Real estate is a perfect place to do that because you hedge against inflation, plus you get some amazing tax benefits. So we go out and we find these properties and we negotiate and we understand what we're looking at so that we can really find that diamond in the rough that's going to end up leading to the best returns that are the most secure. Because typically what's cool about this space is when you look at the stock market over any 10-year period, typically you're looking at, about 7 to 8% average return. You might be able to get up to 11 or 12 if you hit it just within the right 10-year window, but usually there's a big dip. Well, real estate usually has much higher returns. And especially when you're investing in assets like we do, they've got good returns because we're going in, we're actually forcing that value increase. And so that's essentially what we do. And, we do that in multiple markets, and we like newer properties because they're easier to manage. We like older properties because there's more problems, which means more profit. And so it's just about blending these different pieces. And typically, we're working with, high income earners or high net worth individuals, people who have 50, 100,000 or $1 million to write a check. And then they co-own that property with us.
Sure. And Steven, just so we're clear, are you guys doing it on an individual property basis, or you're doing it like on a fund model?
Yeah, we think funds are phenomenal because they allow investors to have diversification. But a lot of the deals that we do are individual syndications, meaning people have the ability to choose that individual asset and they can put it in their investment portfolio like a little trophy. Hey, I own a piece of this 300-unit apartment building. So it depends. What we've found is that some of our investors love funds because they know, like, and trust us. They like the philosophy and they let us go and manage it. And we, of course, make our profit on success. And then some people like choosing those individual things. That goes back to that one of those points I was making, where it's really important to know what you want and why you want it. Because when you get clear on what you want, it can be that much easier to understand, is this the right fit for me? Do I want to invest in this diversified pool, or do I want to invest in this individual property?
Absolutely. And so it sounds like you guys actually offer both. I just want to make that clear for our audience: so funds and individual syndications per property, right?
Yep, exactly.
That's super neat. Real quick, so Steven, I'm curious. You mentioned tax advantages. I want to go there because we talk about systems, etc. Do you guys use strategies like cost aggregation studies and tax advantages strategies as such for your investors?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's always looking for new ways to pay less in taxes. And that's one of the beautiful things about real estate is that, even as a passive investor, you're able to essentially write off all or majority of the passive income that you receive while you own that property. So, the mechanics of it is we buy a property, we do a cost segregation, which just really means there's all these different pieces within a building, from the carpets to the toilets, to the mirrors, to the walls, to the paint, to everything in between. That all is depreciated at a different schedule. Some are on 5 years, some are on 10 years, some are over a 27.5-year window. So we go through a process where we actually determine all of those little individual details. And then we take that depreciation accelerated, which means we actually take it all up front. And so during that whole hold period, for most people, they're able to defer or completely eliminate any kind of taxable income as long as they use the strategy in the right way. So it's phenomenal on that benefit. And then for people who are active investors or who are active real estate professionals, maybe you're a real estate agent, maybe you own a brokerage, maybe you are an active real estate investor flipping houses. When you invest into the kind of deals we do, you're actually able to wipe out or, essentially defer or eliminate majority of your active income as well. So it really depends on your specific situation. That's why it's always important to talk to a CPA, but there's so many advantages that come along with investing in real estate that it's one of the reasons the wealthiest people hold at least 25 to 30% of their portfolio in real estate, if not much more.
Love it. Love it. Steven, we talked about, I want to bring this full circle. You know, being a practitioner, boots on the ground, learning lessons, running your experiments from beginning to end. We've all learned, obviously, not all of us have, I should say, not all experiments have been completed from beginning to end. I think we've learned our lessons in being able to execute them through and through. However, based on, you're the host of the Investor Mindset podcast, what would you say I'm never going to be the guy that said, what is the one thing? I think that's bullshit. There's too many things that take place when it comes to building a foundation. But I do believe that there's often a common denominator that I think you and I have been exposed to. I'd be curious to see what you think is a common denominator, and maybe there's multiple common denominators that you've come across with the over hundreds of folks that you've had on your platform, respectable figures. We talked about this, Chris Voss, Mark Manson, all those guys who sometimes we really see as leaders in the space, in multiple spaces. What is that common denominator that you think you've come across?
Well, what I want people to understand is that any one of these success principles that we've talked about will totally change your life. If you just focus on one of them, it'll be a game changer. So I really encourage you to grab the resource. It's 20-page training, investormindset.com/success. But one of the most important ones that I found that have completely changed my life was the importance of having great mentors, great coaches, and great partners. Really, it all comes down to the most successful people. They've got great advisors around them. Billionaires aren't doing their own taxes. Millionaires aren't negotiating legal contracts without a great attorney on their team. And they all have high performance coaches and personal trainers, nutritionists, and great doctors that are all around them, helping them perform and operate at the highest level. It's important. It's critical. It's a must. Just like you're building your business, you need to be hiring the right people to execute and do the right things. You need to put yourself in the right rooms with the right people who are thinking at a higher level that can pull you up to be able to operate at the highest level. Great example of this is, Michael Jordan is famous for having 7 or more coaches at any given time during his career. We all know his main coach, Phil, the head coach of the team. Phil was not the best player on the team. He was not the person who's going to go slam dunk. He's not even a basketball player per se, but he's a phenomenal coach. He knew how to pull the most out of people and how to make that team work best together. And a great mentor is someone who's already been down the path. That's the Michael Jordan. That's whose footsteps you're going to follow in and model exactly what they do. These are two different people, right? A coach is going to help you get the most out of yourself, and a mentor is someone who you're going to follow in their footsteps. I mentor people in real estate. People follow my footsteps when it comes to passive investing. People follow my footsteps when it comes to building a great business, when it comes to creating a top 200 podcast, when it comes to doing anything that has to do with marketing, right? People are coming, they're learning, they're excited. But when it comes to coaching, I don't need to have done any of those things to be able to help people move to the next level. And so this is why it's so critical that I encourage you to go find a great mastermind. To pay to play. You got to pay to play, whether it's a coach, whether it's a mentor, or whether you're putting yourself in a room, an event. You got to think about that ticket, that entry ticket, as really a filtering mechanism. It filters out all the other people that aren't willing to do it. That doesn't mean you just want to pay to play to be in every single room, because not every room's equal. But when you can go and find the right mentors and you're working with those mentors and they're telling you where they're hanging out, and then you go to those places and you find out where those people who your mentors are learning from are hanging out, and you keep working your way up that ladder, it's going to end up completely changing your life, because now you go from this blue collar mindset to a billionaire mindset. Now you might not be a billionaire, but if you start thinking like one, you'll start actually having some of that stuff happen in your life. And at the core of everything we've talked about today, it all comes down to mindset. You got to lay strategy on top of a good foundation. That means first, you really got to understand what are those thoughts and beliefs that are holding you back. And so I hope that this is helpful. I hope that it was somewhat inspiring. And most importantly, I hope you do something with it. So ask yourself the question, what's one thing that I can take away from today's conversation that I can go implement directly in my life and my business? Because just one thing is going to make a huge difference, let alone the countless different opportunities of different strategies and things we've talked about today.
Gotta lay strategy on top of a strong foundation. Golly, bring it home, man. I mean, this has been incredible, man. I definitely want to take a second to, again, give you a kudos, because I know that it's one thing to talk the talk, but it's another thing to walk the walk. And you're here because you walk the walk, right? And that's who we have in our lab. And I want to just salute you right back at you for that. And with that said, I mean, you guys heard it before. I want to give the plug away. The investormindset.com/success. Make sure you go ahead and go and grab the 5 universal success principles. I mean, if this wasn't a planting of the seed for you to implement your experiments, I don't know what is. I think you really have an effective way of putting information together, and it's very organized. So I appreciate you for that, my man. Where else can the people find you and stay in touch to see how you're implementing your experiments, and maybe if they even want to be a part of it?
Yeah, you're listening to a podcast right now. I encourage you to go click over, subscribe to the Investor Mindset Show, and start diving in. We've got great lessons on personal development and growth and passive investing and active investing every single week. And then I encourage you to jump over to Instagram at Steven.Pesavento. We're dropping great content, inspirational materials every single day, sometimes twice a day. And shoot me a DM. Let me know that you listen to us here, and look forward to serving you guys along the way.
Absolutely. We appreciate you for stepping to the lab, brother. And just like that, we are out.